Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
Most people, when they hear the words serial killer, picture a certain kind of person. Someone unhinged, someone you can spot from across the room, someone whose eyes are slightly wrong, someone who, if they got close enough, you would know, you would feel it. That is exactly what they want you to think. The most dangerous serial killers in history were not wild-eyed drifters who slept in cars and muttered to themselves. They were professors, they were doctors, they were men with perfect credit scores and kids in the school play, and neighbors who said at the press conference afterward that they never would have suspected a thing. They were intelligent, in some cases extraordinarily intelligent, and they used that intelligence not to build something meaningful, but to kill people. Quietly, systematically, for years, sometimes for decades. The average IQ in the United States is 100. The average serial killer has an IQ of 94, lower than normal. That is the story Hollywood tells you. What Hollywood does not tell you is that the exceptions to that average, the ones with the high scores, the advanced degrees, the clinical understanding of human psychology, are the ones who got away with it the longest, the ones who killed the most people, the ones whose cases changed how law enforcement thinks about crime itself. These are the 10 smartest serial killers of all time, and by the time we get to number 1, you will not sleep as easily as you did before. Number 10. Carol Cole. Carol Edward Cole was born in Sioux City, Iowa on May 9, 1938, and his IQ score of 152 placed him comfortably in the top 2% of all human beings ever tested. That is a number that should have meant something, that should have opened doors, unlocked potential, put him somewhere useful. Instead, it gave a deeply damaged child a sharper set of tools with which to hurt people. Cole's childhood was the kind of upbringing that criminologists return to again and again as a case study in how trauma can be weaponized by an intelligent mind. His mother was severely abusive in ways that went beyond physical violence. She would force the young Cole to watch her entertain other men while his father was away, and then beat him afterward to ensure his silence. She degraded him publicly and privately. She told him he was worthless, and when a boy in his class discovered what his home life was like and threatened to tell other children, Carol Cole drowned him at age 9 and told no one. It was his first murder, and he was in elementary school. As an adult, Cole drifted between jobs and relationships, cycling through psychiatric hospitals and short prison sentences for increasingly erratic behavior. Each time he was evaluated, found to be manageable, and released. His intelligence made him articulate in these evaluations. He knew what the doctors wanted to hear, and he gave it to them. He was charming when he needed to be charming. He was remorseful when remorse was the correct currency. This is a pattern you will see again and again in this list. High intelligence does not make serial killers more likely to be caught. It makes them better at not being caught. The murders Cole committed as an adult followed a specific pattern. He would drink heavily. He later described alcohol as something that unlocked the rage he carried every day, and he would target women who reminded him of his mother. He strangled them. In November 1980, he was finally arrested in Las Vegas after confessing to a murder in his hotel room. In custody, he admitted to 14 killings, though he acknowledged there were others he could not fully remember through the haze of alcohol. Carol Cole was executed by lethal injection on December 6, 1985. His last words were an apology, not to the families of his victims, but to the correctional officer who had to perform the execution. Even at the very end, he was managing people's perceptions of him. That is what a 152 IQ in the wrong mind looks like.
Has that made you change your mind in any way?
No.
Has it once ever occurred to you to delay this?
That's always occurred, but
Why not fight for your life?
I just don't care to.
Are you sorry?
For the victim?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you? Anyone in particular?
Especially the one that was the 11-year-old girl way back in 1967. And even doing that 5-year sentence, it wasn't, that wasn't enough.
Number 9. Andrew Cunanan. IQ 147, fluent in 7 languages. Andrew Cunanan was born in National City, California on August 31, 1969, and from his earliest years he was a person of extraordinary and almost aggressive intelligence. By the time he was a teenager, he was reportedly fluent in 7 different languages. He had a photographic memory. He could walk into a room of strangers and within an hour have identified who was worth knowing, what they wanted to believe about themselves, and how to make them believe he was the version of a person they had been hoping to meet. Cunanan was a self-invented person. He grew up in a middle-class household, but he presented himself as the scion of a wealthy Filipino family, a story he maintained through sheer confidence and the ability to know at all times what the people around him wanted to hear. He moved through the San Francisco social scene in the late 1980s and early 1990s as a kind of beautiful, glamorous fixture, someone who appeared to have money, connections, and access, even when he had none of those things. He was, in the truest sense of the word, a con artist, and he was extraordinarily good at it. By the mid-1990s, the con was unraveling. His wealthy patrons had grown tired of supporting him. His drug use had become serious. And something in him, some pressure that had been building beneath the surface of the performance, was reaching a breaking point. On April 25, 1997, Cunanan flew to Miami and killed his former lover, Jeffrey Trail, beating him to death with a claw hammer. Days later, he killed another former boyfriend, David Madsen, shooting him by a lake in rural Minnesota. Then he drove south and killed a retired real estate developer in Chicago. Then he killed a cemetery caretaker in New Jersey. For 3 months, Andrew Cunanan was the most wanted man in America. He was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. His photograph was everywhere. And yet, he traveled freely, sometimes returning to the same neighborhoods multiple times, moving through the world with a confidence that was either extraordinary foolishness or a form of intelligence so cold it did not register fear as a concept. On the morning of July 15, 1997, he walked up the front steps of fashion designer Gianni Versace's mansion in Miami and shot him twice in the back of the head, and then walked away. 8 days later, police found Cunanan on a houseboat in Miami Beach, where he had shot himself before they could enter. He left no note. His motive for the Versace killing has never been definitively established. Andrew Cunanan was 27 years old. A man who could have spoken to anyone in any language about almost anything, chose instead to disappear in the loudest possible way.
Number 8. H. Holmes. Herman Webster Mudgett, who called himself Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, or simply H. Holmes, was born in Gilmanton, New Hampshire in 1861, and he represents a category of intelligence that does not show up cleanly on a standardized test. He was not a mathematician or a linguist. He was a planner, a builder, a person who could hold an enormously complex system in his head, anticipate every variable, and execute it over a period of years without it unraveling. What he built with that intelligence was, quite literally, a building designed to kill people inside it. Holmes moved to Chicago in 1886 and purchased a city block in the Englewood neighborhood. He had trained as a physician, though he obtained his medical degree using a dead classmate's identity, the first indication of how comfortably he operated at the intersection of intelligence and fraud. On the lot he purchased, he began construction of a 3-story building that would later be dubbed by newspapers the Murder Castle. The construction itself was a masterpiece of deception. Holmes hired and fired teams of builders in rapid succession, never allowing any single crew to complete more than one section of the building. This meant that no worker ever understood the full plan. No architect could have looked at the completed building and told you what it actually was, because the workers who built each part of it only knew their own part. What they collectively built without knowing it was a horror show. The second and third floors contained over 100 rooms with walls that could be sealed airtight, gas pipes that connected to a control panel in Holmes's private office, trapdoors, chutes that led directly to the basement, a kiln, and a dissection table. Holmes opened the building as a hotel during the 1893 World's Fair, when Chicago was flooded with tourists who had come from across the country with cash in their pockets and nobody who knew exactly where they were. Women who checked in sometimes did not check out. Holmes insured them, forged their signatures on documents, and collected. He sold some remains to medical schools. He disposed of others in the kiln or in acid vats in the basement. The true number of his victims has never been established. Estimates range from 9 to more than 200, though historians generally place the confirmed figure somewhere between 20 and 30. What makes Holmes genuinely remarkable from an intelligence standpoint is not just the building. It is the scale of the deception that surrounded it. He simultaneously ran multiple insurance fraud schemes, a glass-bending business, a jewelry company, and at least 2 bigamous marriages, all while managing a hotel with a basement full of evidence that could have ended him at any moment. He was caught in 1894, not for any of the murders, but for horse theft and insurance fraud. It was only under investigation for those crimes that the full picture of the castle emerged. Holmes was hanged on May 7, 1896. On the scaffold, he was calm. He had always been calm. That was the most frightening thing about him. Number 7. Israel Keyes. Israel Keyes does not fit any category that existed before him, which is precisely why he is on this list. He is not here because of a test score. He is here because of what he built, a system of killing so methodically designed and so deliberately untraceable that the FBI's own agents, reviewing his case files years after his death, described it as unlike anything they had seen from any offender in the Bureau's history. Keyes was born in 1978 in Richmond, Utah, the second of 10 children. He served honorably in the United States Army, was discharged in 2001, and moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where he started a legitimate construction business, raised a daughter, and maintained a normal life by every observable measure. His neighbors knew him as quiet, reliable, and professional. His clients respected his work. Nothing about the surface of Israel Keyes suggested what was buried underneath it, literally. Starting around 2001, Keyes began burying what he called kill kits in remote locations across the United States. These were waterproofed containers, buckets, caches hidden under rock piles, packages wrapped in garbage bags and buried in state parks, containing everything he would need to commit a murder: weapons, ammunition, silencers, duct tape, rope, shovels, lye, and Drano for body disposal. He buried up to 12 of these caches in locations spread across at least 5 states, from upstate New York to Oregon to Texas to Alaska, years before he planned to use them. The operational logic behind this was precise. When Keyes felt the urge to kill, he would not purchase weapons or supplies locally, no transaction that could be traced to a location and a time. He would instead fly from Alaska to a distant city, rent a car using cash, drive to a region near a pre-buried kit, dig it up, select a victim entirely at random with no prior connection to himself, kill them, dispose of the evidence using his own pre-buried tools, and fly home. Between crimes, he robbed banks to fund the travel. The FBI later mapped 35 separate trips he took between 2004 and 2012. They found evidence of victims in Washington, Vermont, New York, and other states. They believe the true count may exceed 11.
The FBI special agent assigned to his case said plainly there was no profile. He never killed near home. He never returned to the same region twice. He selected victims randomly to prevent any behavioral signature. He was not impulsive. He was patient in a way that forensic psychologists described as almost without precedent in the literature on violent offenders. He buried weapons years before using them and left them there, untouched, waiting. Keyes was caught in March 2012 for one single reason: he broke his own rules. He kidnapped a young barista named Samantha Koenig in Anchorage, Alaska, close to home, someone with connections to the community. And then he used her debit card at an ATM in Texas, which placed his rental car on surveillance footage. He was pulled over for a minor traffic violation in Lufkin, Texas, and police found Koenig's belongings in his car. He confessed. He cooperated in FBI interviews for 40 hours, but he died by suicide in his prison cell on December 2, 2012, before he could be tried, leaving the locations of buried caches and the identities of most of his victims with him. Some of those caches are still out there. The FBI has not found them all.
Number 6. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer has never been identified. That sentence alone places him in a category that almost no serial killer in the modern era has managed to occupy. In a world of DNA databases, surveillance cameras, digital footprints, and a law enforcement apparatus that has spent 60 years becoming increasingly sophisticated, the Zodiac Killer remains a name without a face. And that is not an accident. Between December 1968 and October 1969, the Zodiac committed at least 5 confirmed murders in Northern California, attacking couples in parked cars, a woman walking to a taxi, a cab driver in San Francisco, and was linked to several additional attacks. The murders were bold and varied in method, which itself was a form of intelligence. A killer who never repeated a pattern was a killer who defied the behavioral profiling techniques of the era. But what made the Zodiac genuinely distinctive was what came after the murders. He wrote to newspapers. He sent letters to police, to editors, to the San Francisco Chronicle and the Vallejo Times-Herald, taunting investigators and providing details that confirmed he was the killer. He sent 4 encrypted ciphers, intricate, multi-layered codes constructed with a sophistication that suggested not just a casual interest in cryptography, but a deep fluency with it. He told police that if the ciphers were ever decoded, they would find his name inside them. He told them they would never decode them. He was mostly right. 3 of the 4 ciphers remained unsolved for over 50 years. The one that was cracked, decoded by a teacher and his wife in 1969, revealed not his name, but his motive. He was killing people, he said, because it was fun. And because, he believed, the people he killed would become his slaves in the afterlife, and the more slaves he collected, the better his paradise would be. It was a delusional logic, but it was a consistent one, and it was expressed in language precise enough that the decoded text reads less like a madman's scrawl and more like a carefully constructed theological argument. Investigators received over 2,500 suspects. Letters and phone calls kept coming through the 1970s, then stopped. A 3rd cipher was finally cracked in 2020 by a team of international codebreakers, and it contained no name, only more taunting. The 4th cipher has never been decoded. Several serious suspects have been proposed over the decades, all of them dead, none of them definitively confirmed. The Zodiac stopped killing, or stopped being caught killing, or disappeared into a normal life, or died in obscurity. Nobody knows. The case remains open. He may be the only serial killer in American history who played the game, communicated the rules, and still won. Number 5. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is, without any question, the most famous serial killer in American history, and his fame is itself a product of his intelligence.
He understood, with a clarity that most people reserve for their own careers and reputations, that how you present yourself determines how the world responds to you. He was handsome, articulate, charming, and well-dressed. He wore a sling sometimes or walked with a cane to appear injured and harmless. He impersonated police officers to gain women's trust. He studied psychology at the University of Washington not out of academic curiosity, but as a practical exercise in understanding the mechanisms he wanted to exploit. Born in Burlington, Vermont on November 24, 1949, Bundy operated across 6 states in the early to mid-1970s, killing at least 30 confirmed victims, though some estimates place the true number significantly higher, and Bundy himself, in the weeks before his execution, claimed it exceeded 100. His victims were primarily young women with long hair parted in the middle. He lured them with staged vulnerability. He left no fingerprints. He never used firearms, which left less physical evidence. He changed his appearance frequently, growing or shaving a beard, changing his hair, wearing glasses he didn't need. Witnesses consistently described different-looking men, which was intentional. Bundy was caught twice and escaped twice. The first escape was from a courthouse library in Aspen, Colorado during a recess in his own trial. He simply jumped out of a second-floor window and walked into the mountains. He was recaptured 8 days later. The second escape was from a Garfield County jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, where he spent months losing weight until he was thin enough to squeeze through a hole he had cut in the ceiling of his cell. He disappeared into the darkness and was not found for weeks. During that period of freedom, he committed 3 more murders in Florida. Bundy acted as his own attorney for portions of his trial. He cross-examined witnesses. He delivered opening statements. He turned the courtroom into a theater in which he was simultaneously the accused and the star, and he did it well enough that the judge who sentenced him to death told him afterwards that he would have made a fine lawyer. Bundy used his intelligence the way a counterfeit artist uses skill to make something deeply wrong look from the right angle, exactly right. He was executed by electric chair at Florida State Prison on January 24, 1989. He had spent his final weeks confessing to killings across multiple states, apparently hoping the confessions would buy him more time. They did not. The intelligence that had kept him free for a decade ultimately could not convince the state of Florida to wait any longer.
Number 4. Rodney Alcala. In 1978, while Rodney Alcala was actively killing women in Southern California, he appeared as contestant number 1 on the nationally televised game show, The Dating Game. He was charming on camera. He made the Bachelorette laugh. She chose him over the other 2 contestants. Then, after the taping, she met him in person, felt immediately and profoundly uncomfortable, and declined the date. She later told reporters that there was something about him, something she couldn't name, that felt deeply wrong. That instinct may have saved her life. Rodney Alcala was born in San Antonio, Texas on August 23, 1943, and his IQ was formally tested at 160, a score that places him in the top 0.1% of the human population. He attended UCLA's film school. He was a skilled and prolific photographer. He told his victims he was a fashion photographer and that he could make them famous, and he was convincing enough that women, and in some cases young boys, followed him to remote locations to be photographed. Many of them were never seen again. Alcala's confirmed kill count stands at 8, but investigators believe the real number may be dramatically higher. When police searched his storage unit after his 2010 conviction, they found over 1,000 photographs of women and children, many of them in poses that suggest the photos were taken immediately before or after an assault. The FBI published 120 of those photos publicly, asking anyone who recognized the individuals to come forward. Dozens have still never been identified. We do not know who they are or whether they are alive. Alcala was caught 3 times, and his convictions were overturned twice on legal technicalities, a reflection, in part, of how carefully he operated and how difficult it was to build an airtight case against someone who left his victims in remote locations and selected them in a way that minimized witnesses. During his third trial, in 2010, he chose to represent himself, cross-examining witnesses and at one point addressing himself in the third person, asking Rodney Alcala questions and then standing on the other side of the courtroom to answer them. The jury convicted him on all counts and sentenced him to death. Rodney Alcala died in prison on July 24, 2021, of natural causes, before the sentence could be carried out. He was 77. He never identified the people in the photographs. Somewhere in archives and cold case files across California, there are families who still do not know what happened. Number 3. Edmund Kemper. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born in Burbank, California, on December 18, 1948. He stands 6 feet 9 inches tall, weighs over 250 pounds, and has an IQ of 145. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and declared a criminally insane juvenile at the age of 15 for shooting and killing his paternal grandparents at their kitchen table. He told investigators he had done it because he wanted to see what it felt like. He was institutionalized at the Atascadero State Hospital, where something remarkable happened. Kemper, bored, intelligent, and acutely aware that his release depended on convincing psychiatrists he was safe, obtained access to the psychological assessment tests used to evaluate patients. He studied them. He memorized the correct responses, not the honest responses, the correct ones, the ones that corresponded to the profile of a recovered, non-threatening individual. By the time he turned 21, he had learned to perform sanity so convincingly that a board of psychiatrists unanimously agreed he should be released into the community. He killed 6 female college students between May 22 and April 1973 in the Santa Cruz area. Hitchhikers, young women, people who had accepted a ride from a large, bespectacled, soft-spoken man who seemed so harmless that even the police knew him. Kemper had cultivated friendships with local officers at a bar called the Jury Room. He drank with them. He listened to them talk about the murders, his own murders, and offered thoughtful observations. They called him Big Ed. They liked him. He was never a suspect. On the morning of April 21, 1973, Kemper killed his mother while she slept, then called her best friend and invited her over and killed her too. Then he got in his car and drove east for 3 days. He stopped in Pueblo, Colorado, went to a payphone, and called the Santa Cruz police to confess. They did not believe him. He had to call back several times and provide details that only the killer could have known before they sent officers to verify the story and arrest him. In prison, Kemper cooperated with FBI agents John Douglas and Robert Ressler, who were conducting the first systematic interviews with incarcerated violent offenders in the late 1970s. Kemper was one of their most important subjects. He talked for hours. He described his crimes with clinical precision, explained his motivations, identified the psychological patterns that had shaped his behavior, and provided insights that directly informed the development of the FBI's criminal profiling program. The behavioral analysis unit that exists today, that has helped solve hundreds of murders, was built in part on knowledge that Edmund Kemper volunteered from a prison cell in Vacaville, California. He understood his own mind well enough to teach the people trying to catch people like him. He is still alive, in that same prison, recording audiobooks for the blind. Number 2. Ted Kaczynski. In the 5th grade, Theodore John Kaczynski received a standardized IQ score of 167. To put that in context, a score of 130 is considered gifted. A score of 145 is considered genius. A score of 167 places you in a range so rare that the tests themselves struggle to measure it accurately because so few people have ever scored there. Ted Kaczynski was 10 years old when they measured his intelligence and found that they had essentially hit the ceiling of the instrument. He entered Harvard University on a full scholarship at the age of 16. He was not a happy student. He was younger than everyone around him, socially isolated, and during his time there was recruited to participate in a psychological study run by Harvard professor Dr. Henry Murray. The study, which participants were told would examine their personal philosophies, actually involved having their written beliefs used as the basis for extended, personalized verbal attacks designed to provoke maximum psychological distress. Kaczynski participated for more than 200 hours over 3 years. Some biographers believe this experience, being subjected to sustained intellectual humiliation at a formative age, contributed to the fractures that were already forming in him. He graduated from Harvard, earned a master's degree in mathematics from the University of Michigan, completed a doctorate in 1967, and at age 25 became the youngest assistant professor ever hired by the University of California at Berkeley. His mathematical research was described by peers as extraordinary. He published work in complex analysis that is still cited. Then, in 1969, he resigned without explanation, moved in with his parents, and in 1971 purchased a plot of land in Lincoln, Montana, and built a 10 by 14-foot cabin with no electricity, no running water, and no heat. He lived on game he hunted, vegetables he grew, and the small amounts of money his family sent him. He wanted nothing to do with the world he had left. What he did in that cabin for 17 years was build bombs. Small, precise, hand-constructed devices assembled from components that could be sourced from hardware stores and that left no meaningful forensic trace. He sent them through the mail to professors, computer scientists, airline executives, people he identified as symbols of the technological civilization he believed was destroying human freedom. The FBI case file was named Unabomb for university and airline bombing. The task force assigned to it eventually grew to over 150 full-time investigators, analysts, and agents. It became the longest and most expensive investigation in FBI history at the time of his arrest. For 17 years, they could not find him. Kaczynski's fatal mistake was intellectual pride. In 1995, he sent a letter to the New York Times offering to stop the bombings permanently if a major newspaper published his 35,000-word manifesto, a philosophical treatise arguing that industrial society was enslaving humanity and that violent resistance was not only justified, but necessary. The FBI, hoping someone would recognize the author, persuaded the Washington Post to publish it in September of that year. Within weeks, David Kaczynski, Ted's brother, read it and recognized his brother's voice, his brother's phrases, his brother's specific philosophical grievances expressed in language he had seen in letters Ted had sent him over the years. He went to the FBI. Ted Kaczynski was arrested on April 3, 1996 at his Montana cabin, which contained 40,000 handwritten journal pages, bomb components, and one live bomb ready for mailing. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life without parole. He died on June 10, 2023 in his cell at ADX Florence, the federal supermax in Colorado, reportedly by suicide. He was 80 years old. The man who had been the youngest professor in Berkeley's history died alone in a concrete cell, having spent the last 27 years of his life exactly as isolated from the world as he had always wanted to be. Number 1. Dr. Harold Shipman. Every other person on this list was eventually identified as a monster. People looked at them, at the evidence, at the pattern, at the bodies, and understood viscerally what they were looking at. Number 1 on this list is different, because for 24 years, the people around Harold Frederick Shipman did not look at him and see a monster. They looked at him and saw their doctor. Harold Shipman was born in Nottingham, England on January 14, 1946. He was the second child in a working-class family, and his early life was defined by 2 forces that would shape everything that came afterward. The first was his exceptional intelligence. He was academically gifted from childhood, the kind of student that schools built their expectations around. The second was his mother, Vera, who died of lung cancer when Harold was 17.
He watched her decline over a long period, and he watched her receive morphine injections in her final weeks, watched how the drug transformed her face, how it erased pain and replaced it with something like peace. He remembered that. He graduated from Leeds School of Medicine in 1970 and became a general practitioner, a family doctor, first in Yorkshire, then in the town of Hyde in Greater Manchester, where he built a reputation over 2 decades as a conscientious, dedicated physician. His patients adored him. He made house calls. He remembered their names, their families, their medical histories. He was the kind of doctor people called by his first name. He was also, almost certainly from as early as 1974, killing them. His method was as clean as it was horrifying. During home visits, the most routine part of a GP's work, Shipman would administer a lethal dose of diamorphine, pharmaceutical-grade heroin, while the patient was sitting in a chair or lying in bed. Death would come within minutes, appearing to the untrained eye to be entirely natural. He would remain in the room until the person was gone, then call the family, express his condolences, and sign the death certificate himself, attributing the death to whatever pre-existing condition the patient already had or simply to old age. In many cases, he also falsified the patient's medical records on his surgery computer, creating a paper trail suggesting the person had been in declining health for weeks. For 24 years, this worked. Other GPs in the area noticed that Shipman seemed to have an unusually high death rate among his patients. A funeral director noticed it, a local taxi driver noticed it, and actually went to the police. A neighboring GP grew suspicious enough to compare her death rate to his and brought her concerns to a coroner. Each time, the investigation went nowhere. Shipman was a respected doctor. His patients died quietly of apparent natural causes and had been old or unwell to begin with. There was no crime scene, there was no forensic evidence, there was nothing that from the outside looked like murder. The number of confirmed victims is 215. The likely true figure, according to the government inquiry that investigated his full career, is closer to 250, making Harold Shipman the most prolific confirmed serial killer in modern recorded history. By comparison, Ted Bundy killed 36, Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17, Samuel Little, who holds the American record, killed 93. Shipman killed 250 people in broad daylight in their own homes while they trusted him. He was caught in 1998, and the circumstances of his capture are worth sitting with for a moment. His final victim was Kathleen Grundy, an active, healthy 81-year-old former mayor of Hyde. After she died, following a home visit from Shipman, a new will appeared, leaving the bulk of her estate, approximately £350,000, to Dr. Harold Shipman. Her daughter, Angela Woodruff, who was a solicitor, immediately recognized that the will was a forgery. The signature was wrong. The typewriter used to produce it was old and distinctive. She went to the police and refused to stop pushing until they took her seriously. Police exhumed Kathleen Grundy's body. The post-mortem found a lethal concentration of diamorphine, a drug she had never been prescribed. Police then checked Shipman's surgery computer and found that he had been altering patient records after their deaths, backdating false entries to explain away healthy people dying suddenly. The technology that exposed him was a basic forensic function of his own computer. Timestamps showed the records had been created or modified hours after the patients were already dead. Harold Shipman was convicted of 15 murders on January 31, 2000, and sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. He refused to cooperate with investigators. He never confessed. He never explained his motives. He died by suicide in HM Prison Wakefield on January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, hanging himself in his cell and, in doing so, denying the government inquiry access to the only person who knew the full truth. We still do not know exactly why he did it. We know the number, we know the method, we know the scale. But the why, the thing that every investigation, every psychological profile, every academic study has tried to excavate, remains, like the man himself, completely closed. 250 people through the mechanism of the thing they trusted most. That is the #1 spot. That is what it looks like when intelligence finds the perfect disguise. 10 people, 10 different expressions of the same terrifying idea that intelligence is not inherently good or bad. It is a tool. It is morally neutral. A 167 IQ can produce groundbreaking mathematical research or 17 years of undetected bombings. A medical degree can save thousands of lives or take 250 of them, quietly, in living rooms and bedrooms across a single English town. The thing that runs through every case on this list is not genius. It is patience. It is the ability to defer, to plan, to present a version of yourself so convincing that the people who were looking directly at you did not see you at all. Carol Cole knew what to say to psychiatrists. Andrew Cunanan knew what to say to everyone. H.H. Holmes built a machine and made sure no single worker ever understood what it was. Harold Shipman spent 24 years being someone's beloved family doctor while using that trust as a weapon. The scariest serial killers are not the ones in the movies. They are not wild and strange and easily spotted. They are articulate. They are charming. They are the person at your office who remembers everyone's birthday, the neighbor who always waves from the driveway, the doctor who calls to check how you're feeling. They are patient, and they are extraordinarily good at being whoever you need them to be. If you made it to the end of this, thank you, genuinely. These stories are difficult to sit with, but they matter. Understanding how the most dangerous people in history operated is not morbid curiosity. It is how we get better at finding them. And for the record, all 10 of the people on this list were eventually stopped, some by investigators, some by their own hubris, some by the one witness they didn't account for. Intelligence is powerful, but it is not perfect, and it is never, in the end, enough.